house in Baltimore. Buffett once sang, and football is underway. Not just a beautiful win by the Terps over the weekend, but now we have real football as opposed to fake football in the National Football League. I am headed to Cincinnati this weekend. Luke Jones will be monitoring things on the backfields in Owings Mills all week long. We have the Orioles in a pennant race, but football fever here, Luke Jones. It's a purple week. Joe Flacco looks like he's going to play. There have been tons of roster moves over the long holiday weekend as we presented the Peter principles here. So have at it. Make us look good, Luke. What's going on with the Ravens this week, pal?
Well, it's time to play for real. As you alluded to, fake
Fair
football
enough.
in the rearview mirror, which I think at least guys like me who cover it because, hey, it's what I do for a living. I love what I do, but I'm not going to lie, I don't love the preseason from an entertainment standpoint, but it is.
I hate when you wake me up with the 2-minute warning of the games, you know, that you just don't let me sleep through the second half. That's the problem. That's my problem with it.
But it is a necessary evil, and try telling guys like Jalen Hill and Bam Bradley and Patrick Ricard that the preseason doesn't mean anything. Those are 3 rookie free agents who are on the 53-man roster, and in the case of Bam Bradley, probably solidified his case, solidified his roster spot in that 4th preseason game. But very clear, the headline news over the weekend, the return of Joe Flacco to the practice field, anticipated, expected, plenty of anxiety. The Ravens said all along he would be ready for the start of the season. Now, being ready, meaning physically out there and playing, is one thing. How ready he'll be from a football standpoint, that's going to be the big question leading us into Sunday afternoon in Cincinnati. But the Ravens have set their roster. I wouldn't be shocked to see a couple more changes between now and Sunday. There's always a very fluid situation, always a fluidity to the 53-man roster all season, but especially that first week or two. We'd already seen a couple changes that led into final cuts with the acquisition of a couple offensive linemen in Tony Bergstrom and Luke Bowanko, 2 offensive linemen who...
We're learning names here, aren't we, right?
Yeah, we really are. I mean, these by no means are these household names. I mean, these aren't guys that have started a slew of games. Bowanko did start quite a few games as a rookie with Jacksonville a few years ago, but his career has kind of trended downward in terms of playing time. But those 2 guys basically push off Jeremy Zuda and Matt Skura from the 53-man roster.
Matt Skura, that's kind of shocking, right? I mean, he played a lot. They must not like him, right? Like they must have seen enough to say we don't want him on our football team, I guess.
I think they like him, but not enough. You know, I think it's a case where there was some reports not confirmed as of the end of the weekend that he would be on their practice squad, but it sounded like there was some interest there. But you know, it really illuminates how much uncertainty there really is on that offensive line. The fact that 2 guys that they were familiar with to be reserves, I mean, we're not talking about starting players here, but they felt better about going out and trading conditional late-round picks. I mean, we're not talking about a major draft capital that they used in acquiring these 2, but they thought of as much, they had enough concern about the depth on their offensive line that they brought in 2 unknowns a week before they're going to start playing for real. I mean, you look at this projected starting 5 right now, of course, Stanley at left tackle. We assume James Hurst at left guard. Obviously, Jensen has kind of solidified the center spot, at least for now. Jeremy Zuda came back and could not beat him out. They have Yanda at right guard, obviously. You feel great about that. Right tackle Austin Howard looked better as the preseason went on, but I think still some questions about how effective he's going to be. But your 3 backups as the line or as this roster is constructed at the moment coming out of Labor Day weekend, Jermaine Illuminor, who's a 5th-round rookie and a guy that even when they drafted him, acknowledged was a little more of a developmental guy. Now, he did have a pretty decent preseason, played well, I thought, in New Orleans in that preseason finale. And then it's Bergstrom and Bowanko. So you're talking about a lot of question marks there on the starting 5, and certainly with their depth. So I would not be shocked if they are not done trying to add to this offensive line group. Whether it's trading a defensive lineman, they have 8 defensive linemen on the 53-man roster right now. That's high, but I don't blame them for not wanting to cut one of those guys just to have an inferior player at another position. I mean, that's not a good way to roster build. That's not a way to build your organization long term, quite frankly. But can they trade one of those guys for a guy that might be able to step into the starting lineup in the next few weeks? We'll see. We'll see what happens. They have 5 outside linebackers. Darius Smith is a name that we've speculated as a possible trade candidate. We'll just have to see how that plays out. I mean, the reality is we've talked about this a lot, and we generally talk about this a lot draft time, but with the spread being so prevalent in college football, it's tough to find quality linemen, and specifically tough to find offensive tackles. But there's just college football is such a different animal now in most cases compared to what you see at the NFL level. So it's really led to a lot of volatility with offensive line play and identifying good offensive linemen. So this line's going to be a work in progress. I said this to you even before the Alex Lewis injury, even before the Nico Siragusa injury, even before John Urschel retired to the surprise of the Ravens on the first day of training camp. Greg Roman has a great reputation that he earned in San Francisco, continued that in Buffalo as being a run game blocking scheme genius. He can solidify that reputation if he gets this offensive line going the way that it's going to need to go. But right now, just a lot of uncertainty, and not the kind of uncertainty you want when you have your franchise quarterback coming back from a summer-long back issue that cost him in the entire preseason. So this offensive line is going to be, or this offense in general, is going to be a major work in progress, and I think that's probably the kindest way you can put it at this point in time. If this team's going to win games early in the season, it's going to be because their defense plays at a very high level and they are playing field position using their effective special teams and Justin Tucker kicking field goals, because I don't know how anyone can look at this offense right now and have particularly high expectations because, one, I'm not sure the personnel is all that great in most of those positions, and two, they just haven't had time to gel and really work together the way you'd like, starting with the quarterback, but trickling down to those other positions as well.
Well, we're going to find out how good they are, but we're also going to find out about the coaching this week, right, Luke?
Yeah.
Because at this point, they've sat on Flacco for 5 weeks. They've done a lot of smiling, and a lot of the executives around there have said he's going to play, he's going to be fine. Oh, okay. I mean, I now believe that. I see that he's going to play. I don't know how much ring rust there would be for him. Maybe it's a good thing for Joe. Maybe Joe's been doing mental reps every day and is really kind of on to this thing and has something to prove and does feel a little spry and a little healthy at this point. But to your point with the offensive line, I don't know how we could look at it as fans, as anyone. I don't know how the Bengals could look at it right now and whatever tape that they have on it and look at it and have any idea about what we're going to see on Sunday. Because the one thing that they've managed to do, and this is a great Harbaugh paranoia thing, is whatever happens on Sunday is going to be a surprise to all of us, right? Kind of like what the Terps look like. College football is a little bit like that, right? Like, you don't really know what they're going to look like till they get out of the field. I mean, nobody thought Maryland had 51 points in them the other day. They had some special teams in them, certainly on the road in Texas. So, that would be somebody's going to be surprising this Sunday. Somebody you think's going to be good is going to play like dog meat. Somebody you think's going to be, the Ravens are going to put 34 points up or something. Somehow, some way, it's going to look good for a period of time, I guess. I mean, I just hope that there aren't penalties. I hope that there aren't miscommunications where the ball goes up in the air and Flacco throws 1 or 2 picks and has 1 or 2 more picks that are because of communication issues or because he's getting clubbed from the blind side because they can't protect him the right way. We have running backs that are unproven. I mean, there's nothing here this week to say, let's go to Vegas and bet on the Ravens this week, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, even if you think this is going to be a playoff team on the heels of its, on the back of its defense and Justin Tucker being the best kicker on the planet, I mean, there's just, I don't know how you can look at this thing and not think there are going to be some substantial growing pains. I mean, when you're in a position where you have a quarterback coming back from injury, when you have some uncertainty on the offensive line, whether it's because of injuries like Ronnie Stanley, who is back practicing but missed a good portion of the summer, missed preseason action.
Which isn't the worst thing, by the way. I mean,
it's not the end of the world, but when you're in these kind of positions, you lean on your old reliable, right? You lean on those known commodities. And think about it. What were those known commodities in 2016? For Joe Flacco, it was throwing the ball to Dennis Pitta, throwing the ball to Steve Smith, throwing the ball to Kyle Juszczyk out of the backfield. those guys are all gone. So, I mean...
And it wasn't very good to begin with.
Right, exactly. And that's that's the one point. The Ravens shouldn't have stood pat. But the reality is, and we talked about this over the course of the offseason, I made my feelings very clear about their strategy, not being enamored with the idea that they went so heavy in improving the defense and frankly, just not doing a whole lot to the offense. But when you're talking about those old reliables, that safety net, so to speak, you think back to the beginning of Joe's career, who was it? It was Derek Mason, of course.
Sure.
He had Todd Heap, then it became Anquan Bolden and Dennis Pitta.
Sure.
And, over the last few years it had been Steve Smith, and then Pitta surprisingly coming back in 2016. So you just don't know who that's going to be right now. I mean, on paper, if you look at how everyone profiles, you would say Jeremy Maclin, but Joe's had a total of 2 practices on the field working with Jeremy Maclin. I mean, how much time are they going to need to build some rapport?
Well, that would be the funny thing, because what if he catches 9 balls on? I mean, literally, it could happen, and monkeys might fly and all that stuff. But but watching the game on Sunday, it's like the preseason never existed for any of us, whether we paid for tickets, went down there, stayed up late, tweeted about it, or otherwise. Nothing we saw was real. Everything we're going to see here this week is real, and all of it's going to be very much a work in progress, which is a little titillating, a little high wire, a little exciting, certainly for me being there in Cincinnati and for every fan sort of buckling up the chin strap this week. But I don't know that we could possibly predict that this is going to go well, right? I mean, I don't know that. I mean, we might look foolish on Sunday night, and they might win by 20 points, and they may score 5 touchdowns, like I said, but I don't know how we could look at this, and I don't even know how to opine on it, Luke, to be honest with you. I don't know that there's anything we could say that would be accurate or real other than pointing out the obvious, which is they haven't played together. They haven't practiced together, and this should not be – you should not be able to be successful doing it this way, but they might be, right?
They might, and one of the reasons why is you look at what's going on with Cincinnati right now. I mean, Vontaze Burfict suspended, Pac-Man Jones suspended. I mean, that's two, especially Burfict, who, along with Geno Atkins, I mean, he's – if not the best player on that defense, he's one of the 2 best players on that defense, regardless of whether he's a knucklehead or not. And I think it's very clear, and knucklehead's probably a kind word to use in describing Vontaze Burfict, but it is what it is as far as him not being on the field. So the Ravens will benefit in that regard. I think the one thing you take away from the preseason is the defense played exceptionally well. I said this to you before the 4th preseason game. This is as high on a Ravens defense as I have been since Ray Lewis and Ed Reed were on this football team. That might not be saying a whole lot because, let's face it, the defense hasn't exactly been great since, 2011, let's say. But you do really like what you see there. Now, that doesn't mean that they're completely devoid of questions, that side of the ball, but the questions there seem far more inconsequential than what we're talking about with the offense. So, the formula for the Ravens winning on Sunday, probably to win 13-10 or 14-13 or something along those lines. And, I think if you look at, even look at last year when they beat Buffalo in Week 1, that's what kind of game it ended up being. They scored a little bit, and their defense played really well. But, yeah, I mean, you look at this defense or this offense right now, and getting back to a point you made, which was really interesting, it's almost like a college football team because this offense didn't even come close to having all of its horses on the field at any point during the preseason, whether you're talking the O-line. I mean, the wide receivers were out there, but with Flacco not being on the field and Ryan Mallett not exactly playing at a high level, let's call a spade there.
Sure.
It's really difficult to evaluate what you had from Jeremy Maclin, how accurate you can be in seeing what to expect from him. You kind of just go off track record, and that's all you kind of can do. But you made the point, there is unknown. Now, beyond the expectation of just saying, well, I don't expect the offense to be very good, and I'd be lying to you if I thought anything else about this offense, at least over the first couple weeks of the season. There is that unknown. I mean, Greg Roman is known with his run game, with his blocking schemes that he used in San Francisco and Buffalo. As much as we've talked about it being more physical, more downhill, a little more man power rather than the zone that they'd been trying to run and trying to duplicate that they ran so effectively under Gary Kubiak and couldn't do that with Mark Trestman and then Marty Morningwig taking over last year. Greg Roman is multiple in his looks, and he really has a reputation for game planning a defense very effectively. And some weeks he'll use more man, some weeks he'll be more zone. There'll be a combination. I don't think you're going to see Flacco doing much zone read or anything like that, but his running games have had that in the past with Tyrod Taylor and Colin Kaepernick. So there's a whole lot there that is unknown as far as what they're going to try to do. As far as expectations for the end results, I think it's tough to expect too much, but maybe they can do some things that will catch Cincinnati off guard. I mean, that's the element of surprise is probably the best thing they have going for them going into this Cincinnati game, because it's hard to expect Joe Flacco to be particularly sharp in this game. I don't care how accomplished.
Yeah, it's hard to do, right? I mean, for him to think he's going to go out there and make it look easy this week. It was hard for him to do when he's practicing every week and in there. And I am concerned the first time he takes a hit on Sunday, right? Like we're all going to be, just waiting for whenever that moment is, right?
I mean, the level of concern, it started with, okay, he practiced Saturday. How did he get through the next couple of days after that? Is he on the field Wednesday? Is he on the field Thursday? Is he on the field Friday? Is he a full participant? Is he really limited? I'm sure we're not going to be able to glean too much from the media viewing portion of practice each of those 3 days. But, I mean, it's great to say Joe's going to be back on the field, but if his back flares up, on Friday morning, then what? So even taking into account to just say, okay, assuming the health is okay, and that's a big assumption right now, but it's all we have to go off of right now. How sharp is he going to be? How much of a rapport is he going to have with Jeremy Maclin, with the Ben Watson, who wasn't doing a whole lot back in the spring when Joe was on the field, and before that was lost to an Achilles injury back last August. So Ben Watson at this point probably looks like their top receiving option at the tight end position. Boyle's going to play a lot, but he's not exactly he's more of a blocker, a guy who's probably going to catch some balls. I think he'll be okay with what's thrown his way, but probably not a guy you're going to count on to make a spectacular catch on 3rd and 9. So there's a lot to really ask questions about, and the running game didn't particularly look great in the preseason. Again, because they didn't have their starting 5 on the field, but Terrence West isn't a guy that you expect to run for 1,500 yards. I mean, maybe if he's behind the Dallas offensive line, maybe he could be a 1,300-yard back. I don't see that with this Ravens group. Buck Allen, Danny Woodhead. I mean, they reports over the weekend of them adding a couple running backs to the practice squad. I mean, who knows what happens there. But
it's been an active week for George Kukanis and Eric DeCosta and Ozzie Newsome. I mean, they've known all along that they were going to have these holes, right? And now they've had to go out onto the trade side and using draft picks to deal with the offensive line's leakiness. I mean, let alone anything else that's going to happen with this team, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just there's a lot. It's very unsettling.
It has not been ideal, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's
right?
the best way to put it. And we talked about this. I mean, even before the injuries hit them, really, obviously they lost Pitta during OTAs, but they lose Kenneth Dixon right before the start of training camp. I mean, he was the running back who easily had the most upside. I think we all can agree on that. So losing him and then losing that interior line depth, I mean, it just if you had a running game that you felt really good about, you could almost treat this as the Ravens did when Joe Flacco was a rookie. Back in 2008, that you just knew they were going to run the heck out of the football. They had 3 guys that could carry the ball, and you were going to try to win low-scoring games that way. And I think their ideal formula is going to be that they're going to win with defense and ball control and not committing turnovers and not making mistakes and hoping that you're going to hit on some verticals to use Mike Wallace and Brashad Perriman, who's also back practicing, so that's good news. But you have to have the running game for that to come together. If you're in 2nd and long, 3rd and long, you're putting Flacco in a really difficult position. And let's face it, we all would agree, the last couple of years, by no means all Joe Flacco's fault. And anyone who tries to suggest that is not paying attention. But that said, I can't absolve Joe's play over the last 2 years completely either. He didn't play particularly well. How much of that's the knee? How much of that is poor footwork? How much of that is not reading defenses as well as he needs to? It's probably a combination of all those things. But to have that running game would make you feel that much better about this offense. But there's just nothing to take away from the preseason that makes you feel overly confident, other than, and I'm going to borrow a phrase here from our friend Brian Billick, taking that leap of faith that Greg Roman has.
Remember the leap
out.
of faith. We took that with Scott Mitchell, didn't we?
Yeah, and we saw that lasted all of 2 games. Hopefully this leap of faith has a little more meat to the bone. But again, it's we're not trying to sing the blues here. I mean, Cincinnati's got its issues as well. Their offensive line took some major hits this offseason, and some big questions there at left tackle and center. If you read some of the reports from
we're going to be talking to people in Cincinnati all week, and as much as the Ravens are unsettled, so are the Bengals.
Sure.
I don't know any team. Look, the Patriots are unsettled right now with the Edelman situation,
sure.
right? So every team has an issue, and this is one of those weeks where the Colts don't have luck at all, right? All sorts of weird things. Veteran players are getting moved around. Brock Osweiler's back in Denver, for crying out loud. So all the things we talked about for months and months and months, things start to crystallize a little bit, and once they start rolling the ball around on Thursday night and kick it out there on Sunday, the team is what it is right now. There is no more, well, we're going to improve through the draft, we're going to improve on free agency. Now you got to go play, and no one is ready for John Urschel to walk away, Alex Lewis to get injured, Pitta to get injured, Tavon Young to go down, your quarterback not being ready to play. The Ravens have had as many challenges as any team out there over the last 6 weeks, and, they can still be 1-0 at 4 o'clock on Sunday.
Sure. There's no question about that. It's unfortunate for them that they were really hammered with injuries on the side of the ball that, quite frankly, was clearly more vulnerable on paper going into the season, and that's just, they made their bed, they have to sleep in it. The injuries are part of the game, and people can talk about their off-season program, which they've revamped the last year or two, whether that's been effective or not. Certainly that's up for debate, and those will be questions at this point will be asked at the end of the season, especially waiting to see how they do from a health standpoint over the next 4 months. But you're right. What's done is done at this point. It's kind of like talking about the Orioles starting pitching situation. We all know it's not good enough, or we all know that it's a major concern, but you're not going to change anything about it.
Yeah, what are you going to do about it now?
Right. So you just you play the hand that you have, whether it's partially self-inflicted, partially bad luck, whatever. No one's going to feel sorry for you. The Bengals don't care that the Ravens had some injuries or the Ravens didn't do enough to their offense. They're going to kick it off on Sunday, and what you hope is a defense that absolutely looked like a championship caliber defense in the preseason.
Well, let's talk about the defense, because we've been bitching about the offense.
Sure.
Tell me what you love about it. What is going to show up on Sunday to you? Is it the back end? Is it the pass rush? Is it the run stop? I have to think that running the ball week by week over 16 games as we go into this season, I think it's going to be very difficult to run the ball on this team. And for that, we'll see how they pass. If they can't get off the field on 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 13, as they couldn't when the secondary couldn't cover, that even when they could stop the run and put some good down and distances together, getting off the field becomes the key, and that's something in the preseason they did. They got off the field on 3rd down in the preseason.
They did. And, I think you do look at the teams they played in the preseason and say, okay, well, you're talking about a Washington offense that very clearly lost some big pieces. You're talking about a Miami team that had just changed quarterbacks, and that quarterback being Jay Cutler anyway. You're talking about, just go down the list. Buffalo, Tyrod Taylor got knocked out early. That's a team that's clearly reloading, if not full-blown rebuilding at this point.
Or tanking, if you want to call it.
So you can kind of be dismissive of their opponents. But that said, the numbers don't lie. This defense looked really, really good. And you're right. This team better be able to stop the run. This team better be top 3 in run defense. There's really no excuse for that. If they're not, then why'd they spend all that money on Brandon Williams, especially when you have Michael Pierce, especially when you have Brent Urban, and go down the list. Every single one of those defensive linemen that they ultimately kept, other than maybe Chris Wormley, who's a rookie, it's not exactly stunning to see a 5 technique guy adjust slowly. Brent Urban had the injuries, of course, early in his career, but didn't really see him become much of a factor until last year at times. I think Bronson Kafusi, even before the injury last year, wasn't anticipated to be a major part of what they were going to do. Other than Wormley, and it's not as though he was terrible, he was just quiet in the preseason, you saw all these other guys splash. Now, how many of them are active on game day? How many of them continue to be on the roster, as we alluded to, with the possibility of a trade if they can work it out, to maybe get another offensive lineman, to maybe get another player at a position of need? But that is a very, very stout defensive front. I think you look at outside linebacker. I mean, Terrell Suggs is clearly still an above-average outside linebacker, even if he's no longer a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And I think you liked what you saw from those young guys. And there's a lot of pressure on these young guys, by the way. I mean, it can't be all Suggs as far as a pass-rushing presence coming off the edge. Matt Judon's got to get after it. Tyus Bowser, who I thought had a very strong preseason for a rookie, and you like seeing that out of a second-round pick. He needs to be able to get after it. You want to see that from Zadarius Smith. I think Tim Williams, preseason opener being rough, that performance aside, I think you saw how disruptive he can be. Now, granted, a lot of those flashes, a lot of those snapshots did come against second and third team players, but you're hoping that the combination of those guys, along with some creativity, and this is where it's really going to be on Dean Pease. The pressure's on him. He's got all the horses now in the back end of the secondary with the additions of Brandon Carr and Marlon Humphrey, who played in the preseason finale. I think you saw what kind of potential he has, even though he's not going to be starting from day one. They added Tony Jefferson. Dean Pease has all the horses in the world to be creative, to be innovative, to offer different looks, to do lots of different things, to not be caught up in tendencies or patterns that opposing offenses can dissect and expose. I mean, it's all there for this defense to be one of the top 2 or 3 in the league. And as I said to you after draft weekend, I thought that's how good this defense was going to have to be if this team's going to be a playoff team, because I wasn't seeing this offense having the kind of ceiling that would be able to survive a defense that would, just be okay. That would just be good. We saw last year, final month notwithstanding, this team had a pretty darn good defense, but it wasn't elite. And we saw this offense, that wasn't quite good enough. They got off to the 3-0 start, but they lost some close games. 1, because the defense couldn't hold late leads, and 2, because their offense wasn't prolific enough over the course of 60 minutes. So, but I think the potential is there for this defense to be special, to be really good. Now, is it going to be so good that it can overcome an offense that could end up not being good, could end up being pretty bad, if we're being honest, looking at how there are so many questions on paper? That remains to be seen, but this defense, other than, I think there's a question at inside linebacker with Correa, didn't really take control, didn't seize that starting job in a way that you would have liked, but I think the fact that they're going to use so much dime package as their primary sub package this year.
Yeah, how much is he going to get on the field, Correa?
I mean, he's going to be on the field, but the fact that, you saw how the final couple of preseason games played out. I mean, Patrick Owasso, I'd even, maybe not week 1, but I'd throw Bam Bradley into that conversation as the season goes on, potentially. Correa's going to get the opportunity. He's going to get the first crack.
And McClellan's not around anymore, right?
Right, and the McClellan injury certainly hurts. You and I haven't talked about that as much. That's someone versatile on game days, very good in special teams, someone that...
And he was a bit of a leader, too. He and his wife would always cook for the guys and stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, he's... People don't know about him, and he's a quiet guy. He's a good guy, but and he doesn't come out and do. He's done our show once or twice here and again, and usually gives me a smile. But I know behind the scenes, he's a community organizer for that team, and a veteran guy too.
Yeah, and that's not a season crippling kind of loss, but that's a sneaky tough loss when you talk about what he does on special teams. Now you're going to be counting on guys like Owasso and Bam Bradley to pick up the slack as far as the things that he did on specials. And McClellan's, he's one of those glue guys. One of those, on a given day when you have 46 guys active on game day, you might have, 2, 3 reserve linebackers at most. If you have a couple injuries, say C.J. Mosley tweaks his hamstring and misses the third and fourth quarter, and, Terrell Suggs or, Matt Judon, whoever it is, suddenly you're looking at a guy like McClellan who could play 4 different positions where not going to be great, but you might be able to survive. So that's tough. So I think inside linebacker. I mentioned that the young edge players have to, what they did in the preseason has to translate. We know that the regular season is a different speed than the preseason, so there is an adjustment there, especially for Bowser, especially for Tim Williams, considering those guys are rookies. But I think overall, the couple questions that the defense has, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the nickel spot. Ladarius Webb has handled that. Clearly Tavon Young would have been that guy. I think Jalen Hill could be in the mix there sooner rather than later, because the reality is there was a reason why they moved Ladarius Webb to safety 2 years ago. He's not the same guy he was 5 or 6 years ago, and you can't blame him for that. But he did have a good preseason. You hope he can handle that nickel spot. You hope that they can unleash Anthony Levine at that dime spot where they can do some different things. Those two pretty solid defensive backs playing the run. You can blitz those guys. You can drop them in deep coverage and blitz Weddle or Jefferson. I mean, there's lots of different things you can do. They have the opportunity to be very multiple with this defense. And when you have that, that's how you're able to hide those 1 or 2 spots on the field where you're not quite as strong. They have to stay healthy. That's obvious. The health of Jimmy Smith will again be paramount. I think they're better equipped to survive without him this year, but they're not going to be an elite defense if he's missing time.
It's kind of crazy. They probably would have been a playoff team last year if he didn't get hurt, right? Yeah, that's how close they were, really. And we think about last year as a failed year, and we didn't make the playoffs. We all have the disappointment of Christmas, but the Jimmy Smith thing, just when you consider the one thing that went wrong last year that got everything off the rails, and here we are on the eve of Cincinnati, and we don't even know if our quarterback's going to be standing upright. So, I mean, the question marks are large for this team right now, but, the margin for error and the margin for making the playoffs literally was, well, if Jimmy Smith would have stayed healthy, I really do believe they'd have made the playoffs last year. As simple as that.
They probably would have. I think that's fair. I think, but staying healthy, that's a skill. That's
sure.
That's part of someone's profile. And with Jimmy Smith, he's 29. He had to his credit, had a healthy preseason. I only recall him missing maybe a day or two, and not even sure if that was more John Harbaugh just giving him a day or two when necessary. But he's got to stay on the field, and if he's missing time, it's hard to look at that secondary. I don't think it's a terrible secondary without him, as it was a year ago, pretty much. But Brandon Carr and Marlon Humphrey doesn't sound nearly as good as Jimmy Smith and Brandon Carr or Jimmy Smith and Marlon Humphrey.
Well, Tavon Young also was, a huge part of what the plan was. That was the plan, right?
No doubt. I mean, the Tavon Young injury, we kind of forget about it because it happened back on June 1st, and Webb's done has done a very solid job. Jalen Hill's been a godsend. I mean, you're talking about a guy who was a rookie free agent tryout during rookie camp. I mean, this guy wasn't even one of their original rookie free agents that they announced, a couple days after the draft. This was a guy who was given a tryout during rookie camp weekend, won a job, won a contract, out of Jacksonville State. He's 5'10", 185 pounds, and just made plays throughout the preseason. Now that's going to carry over. Then not necessarily expecting him to be on the field 50 plays a game to start, but he's the first guy up if Ladarius Webb shows signs of not being able to handle a nickel corner spot at this point in his career. So, but the Tavon Young, if they had him in addition to what this defense looked like over the preseason, you'd be looking at this defense in even scarier terms as far as...
I'm telling you, I sat with Mike Tomlin for 4 hours at a hockey game. We talked no football at all. The only thing we did talk about was he's like, I love that Tavon Young kid. Boy, that kid can play. And you know what I mean? And for the Steelers coach to mention that to me in passing and then for him to go down a couple of weeks later was really demoralizing because I think, one of the rival coaches confided in me that he saw a kid that might be a Pro Bowl player one day.
Sure. And I think if there was one spot in that secondary where you said, okay, they're a little more vulnerable there, it was that nickel spot. Because, this is as deep as they've been with outside corners in a long time. I think even their number 4 outside corner, Sheldon Price, who suffered a concussion in the New Orleans game but made the 53-man roster, he's a guy they like. Now, he's had some issues staying healthy, kind of a familiar refrain, talking about Jimmy Smith, but, Sheldon Price is a guy they like even as their fourth outside corner. So they're loaded on the outside. They are a little more vulnerable on the inside. That's why the emergence of Jalen Hill has been so important for them. Maurice Kennedy, they placed on IR with the potential designation to return. That's not set in stone. They don't have to designate ahead of time like they used to, but very clearly he stayed on the roster until Monday to remain eligible for that. So he might be someone that can give them some help there at some point in the second half of the season. But right now that's kind of the one spot. As much as you like this defense, or this specifically this secondary, the nickel spot's a little more uneasy. But they do have Webb. They have Levine playing dime. He can play nickel as well. So it's not as though the cupboard's completely bare there. But that's maybe the one spot you look to and say, okay, I think those other positions in their secondary can be great. That's the one that could be a little bit of an issue. But again, I'll go back to what I said. Dean Pease has enough depth, enough manpower, really all over that defense that this should be as creative and as innovative of a defense as we've seen probably since, to the days of Rex Ryan running things here when Ray Lewis and Ed Reed were at least in the latter half of their prime at that point.
He is Luke Jones. He is Baltimore Luke, and Luke at WNST.net. He'll be out on the backfields at Owings Mills all week long. We've got Orioles to talk about, Ravens to talk about, Terps to talk about, things to get to around here. It was a long holiday weekend, but we are back on duty all week long here for all things September. You can find me, Nasty, at WNST.net, as well as on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram. We stream live on our Facebook Live, as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. I will be in Cincinnati this weekend, or as Earl Weaver once called it, Cincinnati. We'll be there on Sunday, and of course, full coverage here on Monday and on all of our social media channels throughout the game this weekend. You can find anything you miss here in the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. We're going to be talking a lot of football this week, lots of Cincinnati Bengals this week as we get you guys ready for week one around here. I am excited about it. I know that. Morning Newspaper delivers to your email inbox at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life, guaranteed. Breaking news. We've had a lot of that. Maybe some more roster moves. Certainly the Orioles can be calling up some more guys throughout the week here. All of that will happen first on the WNST Tech service. That is our breaking news service. It is our best feature. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. Dennis Kolatzis will be here on Thursday from 3 until 5, driving you home. He is happy to have real football because fake football is not the same. We sort of all know that. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.